Okay, the last candidate for District 1 is Christine Margiata. Christine, are you hiding out there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so what you're going to do is have 3-minute opening here, presentation, make your case.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you so much for having me this evening. It's great to connect with all of you. My name is Christine Margiata, and I'm a candidate for Claremont City Council here in District 1. And I want to start by sharing how important Claremont has been to the foundation of my life and career. So I grew up here in Claremont, attended our local schools, went to Scripps College, had my first apartment here at the Plum Tree Apartments, and really credit my time growing up in Claremont as the foundation of the work that I've done over the last 20 years. So it instilled in me this passion for community, a commitment to tackling big problems, having hard conversations, working across diverse populations. So over the last 20 years, I've led organizations, I've led coalitions, I've managed large budgets, $300 million plus public and private budgets. And most importantly, collectively in the coalitions I've been a part of, we've been able to make real measurable progress on issues like homelessness, economic and racial justice, LGBTQ rights, mental health issues. It really runs the gamut of community issues that I've had the privilege of working on. And I'm mindful as I've stepped into this campaign of how unique this moment in time is. Not only are we facing a pandemic where so many of our residents are struggling with the health, mental health, and economic challenges of our time, we're seeing a massive uprising around racial injustice, grappling with climate change, and really struggling with the erosion of our democracy and our faith in institutions. So this is really what motivated me to step in this moment. I've been a longtime Democrat. The last 24 years, I've been a Democrat. I've worked on most elections, campaigning for candidates across the state, across the country, traveling to swing states to campaign in presidential races, working on key issues and ballot measures, both in my time with SCIU, working for the labor union, and just as a private citizen, I care deeply about our democracy and feel strongly about electing progressive leaders to office and campaigning on key issues. So I truly never anticipated running for office, but I'm someone who, when I see a challenge in the community and I know that I have the skills and resources to help, I step in. So that's what's happened here over the last couple of months. I see our community struggling, and I know I have what it takes to support Claremont through this crisis and beyond. I'm grateful for your consideration tonight.
Let's move on to the questions now. Do you support Proposition 15? What effect would its passage have on Claremont?
So I am a big supporter of Prop 15. I've watched its development over the years, I've known it as Schools and Communities First, and have worked closely with many of the organizations that work to get it on the ballot. So what I know is that this will create vital reform that we've needed in this state for a long time, potentially bringing up to $12 billion for our schools, for housing, for infrastructure, and right here in Claremont, the potential to bring over $1.8 million, not only to our local schools, but for tackling housing and homelessness, our infrastructure needs, our trees, our parks, vital services that we've not been able to support here locally, and services for our young people, for vulnerable populations here in Claremont. I also know that Prop 15 would provide critical tax cuts for small businesses, and particularly in this time when we have so many small businesses here in Claremont that are struggling, this will provide critical relief for them in addition to the funding. And finally, it creates the transparency and accountability that we've so needed in government to understand how our resources are being spent and how they can be spent as effectively as possible.
Okay. Second question. In what Claremont community organizations have you had a leadership role? How has this leadership experience prepared you for serving on the council?
Yeah, so I appreciate this question because it gives me the opportunity to address a myth that I've heard about my campaign, which is that I have this belief that I've not been involved in our local community. So in addition to growing up here, spending my childhood and young adulthood here, I've also been involved in local organizations. So I'm a founding advisor of Claremont Change. My wife and I facilitated the board retreat for Sustainable Claremont and have been very engaged in that organization. I supported Devin Hartman in his work at CHIRP as he was preparing to make a big pitch to funders supported him in that preparation as he has sought to raise revenues for CHIRP. But I also want to counter the myth that regional leadership is not supporting our Claremont community. So I serve as the chair of the Measure H Citizens Oversight Advisory Board, which oversees the $300 million implementation of Measure H funds across this region. Those are the funds that we have to tackle homelessness in this community, millions of dollars of which have come right here to Claremont. I'm also the executive director of Social Venture Partners Los Angeles, where I've had the privilege of investing both resources and infrastructure support in organizations all across this region, including right here in Claremont. And what I think is critical in this moment is that we don't see Claremont as an island. We are part of a broader region that is struggling with us, but that also has incredible resources that in partnership, in building partnership and bridges across this region, across the 88 cities in this county and with our county government, we can do so much more than we can alone. And that's the track record that I bring here, is this ability to work across this entire region, across the political spectrum. And I can bring that here to Claremont, here to our city council. I can bring these relationships, this ability to build bridges across the region and right here in our city. And I'd be very proud to do that.
Okay, now for the nasty question. As revenues decrease, what would you cut first?
Our city's budget process has been a huge focus for me, and something I followed very closely even before stepping into this campaign. So I strongly believe that a budget is a moral document and says a tremendous amount about what our community values. And it's critical that we pay close attention to this budget, both as we weather this crisis and long beyond. So I've had a track record of managing large and complex budgets, particularly in times of economic crisis. I led a campaign to end homelessness across the county right as the economic downturn was starting back in 2007, 2008. And what I knew then was that it's critical that in a budget process, we have to look at how we're spending our existing resources as effectively as possible. So rather than jump in with an approach of making cuts, I would look at how is it, what is the impact of the investments that we're making now? And how can we maximize that impact? How can we go farther with the dollars that we have? And then begin to look at this question of new revenue. So what are the needs that we have across this community? Where can our existing dollars get us? And then let's talk about how can we draw in new revenue? And I think we need to do that through public-private partnerships, through leveraging regional public dollars, and then potentially going back to our voters for an additional tax measure, whether that be a sales tax, the transient occupancy tax, a property transfer tax that could bring $500,000 a year to this community. We have opportunities, but it's critical that we make the case that we need these resources to accomplish a shared vision for where this city can go and build the trust in our voters, not only that we use the dollars we have to the most effective end possible, but also that we're moving towards a shared vision that we can all get excited about.
Okay, question number 4. What needs to be done in Claremont for us to join in the national effort to reimagine policing?
Yeah, so this has been such a powerful moment in calling this question of what is public safety to our community? What does it mean for all of our residents in this community to feel safe? Now, I know that our Claremont Police Department is valued and cherished by many across this community. And I also hear the voices of Black and Brown residents who are sharing their struggles with our police department. So I think it's critical that we lift up this conversation and take it head on. And as I've listened to the voices of Black and Brown residents across this community at our police commission, at the Walk a Mile in Our Shoes protest, what I've heard in those spaces are 2 key challenges. One, our local police department is responding to human services needs. So in the last year alone, they responded to over 1,000 calls on homelessness. We have 17 people experiencing homelessness, and our police have responded over 1,000 times. That is not a law enforcement issue, that's a human services issue. Similarly, over 25% of our arrests were for substance abuse challenges. Again, we do not solve addiction through a law enforcement solution, we solve it through human services. So that's one, is that we're asking our law enforcement to solve problems that are not in their wheelhouse. So one, I think we need to align the job to the skills that each department has. Second, we have a disproportionality of arrests. So in this community, Black residents account for 18% of our arrests and only 5% of our population. Similarly, Latinx residents represent 48% of our arrests and only 26% of our population. So it's critical that we ask the question of why is that? We're getting disproportionate results. We have to ask and really dig into that data to understand why that's happening and to take swift action around what it is we can do to correct for those disproportionalities. And finally, I'll say we do need to strengthen the oversight role of our police commission. We have a police commission that has not had the authority and oversight to truly do the job that they're charged to do.
Okay, one last question. Our housing problems cover both homelessness and the lack of affordable housing. How should Claremont proceed to solve those problems?
So I've spent most of the last 20 years working on issues of housing and homelessness. So this is an issue that's very close to my heart. I led an initiative out of the United Way called Home for Good. I started the initiative, and over 5 years, we supported 35,000 people in moving off the streets and into housing. So this is something that I have the tools to tackle. And I will say we absolutely can end homelessness in Claremont. I will say that unequivocally. There are 17 people on our streets. There is no reason why anyone in this community should be homeless. We have the tools to solve this. We have approaches like shared housing, like accessory dwelling units. We also know that permanent supportive housing is 40% cheaper than allowing people to languish on our streets. This is a cost-effective solution and it works. You also mentioned affordable housing. I'll speak to this question of what is really prevention, preventing additional people from becoming homeless. We know that every day more people are falling into homelessness than are moving off the streets. So I think there are 3 key things that need to happen around prevention. 1, we need to support the county's eviction moratorium through local enforcement. 2, we need to consider rent stabilization here in our community, which we are permitted to do, particularly in the midst of this pandemic when we know that 55% of our renters here in Claremont are rent burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. And finally, we need to strengthen our inclusionary housing policy. We've developed hundreds, 1,000 units, and none of those units have been for low and very, very low income people. So through this upcoming housing element process where we will be tasked with siting 1,700 units in this community, it's critical, 1, that we look all across this community for where that housing will be sited, and 2, that we ensure that a good portion of those units are for low and very low income people in this community, so that we can send this message that Claremont is a place that welcomes all of our families, all of our residents, anyone who wants to make Claremont their home.
Thank you for that answer. You have 2 minutes now to present your conclusions. What should people do?
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you again for your consideration. I'm very grateful to the Democratic Club for having us on tonight and for considering us, and I'd be incredibly proud to earn your endorsement. I want to say that as you make this decision, I want to remind you that I am a candidate who has a long track record of dedication, rolling up my sleeves, working across the spectrum, building coalitions, and getting real results in community. I can bring that to Claremont in this moment of incredible crisis. I'm a longtime Democrat. I've had 2 decades of experience solving big problems. I've managed large budgets, $300 million plus public budgets, private budgets. I've built partnerships across the public and private sectors. I've successfully navigated an economic crisis, and in the midst of that, supported tens of thousands of people in moving off the streets around this region. And finally, I don't shy away from tough decisions. I know that this job requires not only challenging conversations, but really hard decisions, particularly in this time. And I'm not someone who shies away from that. I'm willing to make the tough decisions. I'm willing to have those conversations with our residents and with the other council members. So I want to say I'm again, did not expect to be stepping into this campaign, but I feel so equipped for the job and ready to hit the ground running. So I'd be incredibly proud to earn your endorsement. And I would welcome anyone here to visit our website, christineforclaremont.com. Reach out if you'd like to talk more. We have a number of upcoming events. I'd love to hear from you and talk more about our campaign and the future of our city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christine.